Welcome everyone. My name's Marte Bergseng. I'm one of the project managers with ClimateXChange, and I'm going to take you through our proposal process and how to write good bids for the research that we commission. I'm going to talk for about half an hour, and then depending on your questions, we will finish before 2 o'clock anyway. If there are any questions that we can't answer in this session, then we'll come back to you or we'll post answers on our website. We certainly want to enhance our guidance for writing proposals for us. So based on the questions, we will also do that. Next slide, please, Sinesh. I should say as well that we are recording the presentation part here, but we will not be recording the question and answer session. So feel free to ask questions without worry about that being recorded. Excuse me. So what are we going to do today? I'll say a little bit about ClimateXChange for those of you who haven't been in touch with us before. And then we'll spend the main part of the time looking at the quality criteria for our project specifications. So what is it actually ClimateXChange asks for in terms of project bids? And then, as I said, we'll have Q&A, question and answers at the end. Next slide, please, Ines. So briefly about ClimateXChange, we are Scotland's Centre of Expertise on Climate Change. We are fully funded by the Scottish Government and we're funded through their Rural and Environmental Science and Analytical Services Division, known as RESAS, if you've come across that term. But we work across the whole of the Scottish Government and we work on any issues relevant to climate change. And certainly since the Scottish Government declared it a climate emergency, that climate change is relevant to all the portfolios. We have been funded since 2011. So those of you who are familiar with climate change legislation will know that that's not long after the first Climate Change Act was, excuse me, was passed. And so we have supported climate change policy development through all that time. Our role is to commission, manage and deliver research and analysis to support the Scottish Government's policy development. And that is both on adapting to the impacts of climate change, but also the transition to what's now net zero 2045. And we work, of course, on new initiatives. So we're working on things like just transition, which is very much a focus at this time. And the focus on, or the main bulk of our projects vary depending on what is on the agenda for the Scottish Government. But we work very closely with them to answer the questions that they have in terms of developing efficient and effective climate policy. Next slide, Ines. Thank you. So how do we do this? Well, we get research requests from the Scottish Government, and those requests can be quite fully formed, if you like, and be fairly ready to be commissioned, or we need to work with them, with the policy teams quite a lot and our analytical colleagues to figure out what is it that we actually want to ask here. And once we have that specification clear, we know what the questions we want to have answered are, and we know what kind of format would be useful. So are we looking for specific recommendations for policy, or are we just looking at a review of the available evidence in an area? Once we have all of that clear, we can go out to commissioning and we get the bids in. The project is run closely between ClimateXChange researchers and the Scottish Government. We have meetings often every 2 weeks, certainly between ClimateXChange and the researchers, but those meetings also often involve Scottish Government colleagues. So there's a very close working relationship in what we call the steering group. And then we get the project outputs, which are usually written reports. Sometimes there can be other things. There can be spreadsheets of data, or there can be methodologies or models, something else. But most of our work results in a written report. So as it says there, the important thing for us in terms of commissioning work, fair comparison of bids, transparency, and focusing on the understanding from the researchers that this is going to be co-produced, and we will be working with the Scottish Government throughout to create an output that is suitable for their needs. Next slide, please. So it would be useful then at this point to kind of know a little bit about you. So if you either go to slido.com and put in that code there, or use the camera on your phone to access the QR code, then we'd like to know just a little bit about you, because that helps us in terms of pitching this in the right way. There is also a chat function here. If you have any issues, please do let us know. I have two colleagues, Ines and Christy, in the background who will be helping out with any technical. So, have you worked with us before? No, but I would like to conduct research for policy, and that yes is a few. Oh, kind of down, and I have tried, but bid has been unsuccessful. Yeah, so we have a few people who've tried to work with us, but most of you looks like you haven't. So the link should be in the chat there. It's also on screen for me now, but I'm hoping that you can all see it. So hopefully this can be useful both for those who have bid for our work in the past and been unsuccessful, but also for those who would like to work more with policy. We certainly get asked a lot of very interesting and quite challenging questions. So next question, what would make a good specification, project specification, research specification for you? So clarity is coming out quite clearly, no pun intended. But there's a lot of comments there about clear expectations, clear objectives, clear research questions, clearly defined, clear goals, clear budget. So that's good to see that you're wanting that. And hopefully what I will take you through in the next sort of 20 minutes will bring a bit more clarity to the way that we write our specifications. And for those of you who have experience either through CXC, but also in terms of other invitations to quote, what do you find difficult in responding to them? Yeah, short deadlines, tight word counts. Yeah. So I'll say a little bit about why our bid windows are so short and why the timelines are so short, because I think that might be useful at this point. So because we work with policy, the policy timeline and the time that the Scottish Government has to prepare something before it goes to Parliament or before it's incorporated into budget discussions and so forth is often very short. So we are pinching time wherever we can, and that does mean that the assessment that we have to make is how short can we make this bid window? How short can we make the project and still expect to get something useful? And that is a balancing act that we have to do for every single project. So we are very well aware that our bid windows are short, and we are aware that the timeline for the project are also challenging. And we want to see how much we can get in the time that we have available, because often that is not, it's not our choice how much time we can spend. If something has to be laid before Parliament, for example, then the evidence to feed into that must fit on the policy timeline. Otherwise, it won't be useful to our colleagues in Scottish Government. But we are well aware. Thank you. So how to then work within those constraints, because they kind of are what they are, and we do our best. We argue for longer timelines very often with the Scottish Government, so we're trying to make it a better proposition, and we are aware that the quality of the bids will be or we will get better quality bids if we give longer timelines and more time for the research. But in terms of responding to both the timelines and the research specifications as they are, and the policy environment, the key thing for us is that we can see in your own words, as is highlighted there, that you can demonstrate that you understand what it is we're trying to achieve. And very often that is evidence for a specific policy development. It is evidence that needs to fit within the current discussion that's going on. So what is it that the Scottish Government is trying to do? If the Scottish Government is trying to provide clean heat in all Scottish homes, then there's a certain discussion and certain agenda in that area. And we want to see from your proposal that you understand what that context is and what this specific research project will contribute. So things that we're looking for is, for example, Scottish policy context. So what is it that's happening at the moment? What has been going through Parliament? What are the discussions that are being had? Are you aware of policy developments coming up? So are there strategies and plans that will be published later on this year or next year? That's useful for us to know that you understand that context. A lot of our projects are cross-sectoral in nature, and they also require a combination of methodologies. We'll talk a little bit more about methodology in a moment. But again, appreciating that cross-sectoral nature and what the different interests are in this area is really useful. And again, doing it in your own words. We may have said in the specification that this is a cross-sectoral project. We want to see your understanding of that. Next slide, please. So then we get to the methodology. How are you going to answer these questions? We are really keen to see a robust methodology. Obviously, we want to know that you've thought about the data gathering and the data analysis, but it's quite important to explain it in plain English. And the reason for that is we work with policy colleagues across the Scottish Government. Some of them may have a science background. Indeed, quite a few of them do, but quite a few of them don't as well. And if you know that the civil service colleagues will move around, and they move from one area to the other, so they may not be specialists in the particular policy area where they're working. They are policy specialists, but they're not necessarily economic modelers or natural scientists. So explaining your methodology in plain English so that it can be understood by somebody who do not have a particular background in that science is really important. And setting out how are you working through this process? What are the stages in your methodology, and how will the outputs from each of those stages inform the product in the end? How are you working through that process of data collection and analysis to answer the questions in the specification? We're particularly interested in seeing your discussion of suitability, robustness, and limitations. This is something that's often missing in the proposals that we get, and it is really important to have that in, both because we want to see your discussion around your own methodology, but also because the resulting report after when the project is finishing needs to discuss how robust and how, what are the limitations to the way that we've done it. We know that if we ask you to do a review in 4 or 5 weeks, we know that that is not perfect. So we need to have that honest discussion about what have we been able to do and what have we not been able to do. It can be useful to have academic references in your methodology, but we don't want to just have a long list of academic references. There needs to be a reason for them being there. Be clear about what the relevance is and why you are including them. The assessment panel want to know the relevant work in this area. But just putting in a reference is not necessarily doesn't give us the information that we need. It can also be an issue that access for some journals is not possible if they're behind paywalls, for example. So think about that and use the space that you have in our in responding to our tenders to demonstrate your understanding and the fact that you have an overview of this area, not just list all the references that you think may be relevant. Next slide, please. Project management and staff resource is a really key point. Going back to the many comments about time pressure. So here, in terms of the staff resource and project management, we really want to see that you have thought about this particular team working through on the timeline that we have set out, and that they will be able to do that. That you've considered how long the tasks are going to take, how they build on each other, and how the team's expertise will contribute into making that a success. So we're looking for obviously a strong team with the right experience. We need to have a commitment for the availability of those named team members. That's an important thing for us, just to make sure that this has really been thought about at your end before you put the proposal in. We want the project management plan to reflect the methodology and see that there's people allocated to all the different tasks so that this has been worked through. We want to see who the main contact is, who is the project manager, and how, particularly if you're working with other organizations, so you have effectively subcontractors on the proposal, we want to see how that is going to be managed. If two or more organizations are working together, it's really useful just to put in a few sentences about the experience you have of working together and how that is going to be managed. Who is the main contact, for example, and who will ClimateXChange, so myself as project manager or one of my colleagues, who will we be relating to, and who may we escalate issues to if that comes to pass as well. We'll talk a bit more about that with the quality assurance. And then we have some specifics. So, for example, the GDPR compliance, particularly if there are interview data gathering through interviews, and you will be collecting personal information from people. It's really important that we see that kind of compliance, that's mentioned in your bid. Next slide, please. The next section is communication and report writing. Because we work very closely with policy teams, we need to have reports that can be read, can be understood by them, can be understood by other people in Scottish Government, so whether that is politicians or advisors, or anybody who works across the different teams, not just the analysts or the people very heavily involved in the project. So in this section, we really want you to describe your approach to writing this particular report. So link it to the task at hand, and please consider how you're going to make it accessible and how you're going to do it in plain English. So accessibility is about the presentation on the page. Plain English is obviously about the language that you use. And we want to see the understanding of the audience coming through in these parts. So you are writing for a policy audience. It is an informed audience, but it is not a specialist science or research audience. Explain the process that you will go through in delivering the outputs, particularly the QA process, and there's some further points on that later on. We ask for links to previous work, and we really want that to be from the proposed team members. Very often what we get is links to reports that organisation has produced, but we don't know which team members. Indeed, we don't know if any of the team members that are proposed for our project have been involved in that work. And it's really important for us, if we're going to see what is somebody's style, how do they present their research, we need to see that it's their work that we actually have in front of us. Also make sure that the links work, that we can access, that we don't have to go and Google things ourselves. We rarely do that. We don't have time to do that. And we're looking for details on any visualizations that you would like to do. And think back to the accessibility criteria. How do you visualize things so that it adds to the information that you're providing and gives another way of communicating? I can see that there's lots going on in the chat. Christy or Ines, will you let me know if there's any specific issues, questions on what's happening at the moment?
Yeah, there's nothing so far.
Thank you, Christy. Just worried if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to take them just now. And also the last point on this slide, to detail specific data management tasks. Now, there may not be any, there may be some, depending on what the project is. But again, this is very much about us seeing that the response that we're getting from you is not just a cut and paste from your a standard response to any tender. We want to see that you've considered this particular tasks. And for some of our projects, the communication of very complex modelling, for example, can be more challenging than if you are straightforwardly writing up a literature review. We accept that, and if we see that reflected in this section, then we will score you more favourably than if we see something that is very, very generic. Next slide, please. So we're coming towards the end here now. The last section in our on our proposals assessment or quality assessment is the quality assurance and risk mitigation. Pardon me. This is an area where, again, we want you to demonstrate your understanding of risk and that you have considered the risk for this project. It is very good to see that you are certified to different levels and for different standards. That's really good, but it's not enough for us to see that you've considered the risks here. And again, quite a few of those risks will relate to the timeline. It will relate to what is possible to do within the time and the resource that is available. We're very happy to see a completely honest risk discussion and quality assurance discussion here. As I mentioned with the methodology, we want to know that the limitations and the kind of robustness of what you're doing can be discussed in an open and honest way, and that same goes here. Risks in the risk matrix. There's an example here of how to set that out. You may have another way of doing it. What we're after is, again, it's an understanding of what are the risks for this project. And that is both in terms of following through the methodology, so the steps in the methodology, the data collection and the analysis, but also the risks in relation to it can be in relation to your relationship with us, with ClimateXChange. It can be risks in terms of, you know, that there are other policy developments happening at the same time. All of these things we're interested in seeing it reflected in the risk matrix or the risk table. And as set out here, we'd like to know how how significant you think that risk is, what the impact of that risk would be, any mitigation action, but also crucially the response action. So if this comes to pass, you may have set out in your mitigation action that we have a very experienced team and this is unlikely to happen. But what if it does? We want to see that there is a response action, that there are ways that you will deal with any of these risks actually coming to pass through the project. And again, we are very aware that, you know, things can go wrong, and we would much rather have honesty at these points, because then we know that you have thought about this particular project and that you are realistic in what you can manage to do within the time and the resource that is available. Next slide, please. So we have usually we have something up and open, an invitation to quote most of the time, I think it's fair to say at the moment. These are two that we have available for tender just now. Quite different. One is on onshore and inshore storage of carbon dioxide. The other is on future climate in today's decisions. So that's about decision making and climate projections. Christy has posted the link in the chat there, so you can all go and have a look at the proposal, the research, open research proposals page on our website. Any questions that you have on these projects, if you see something that you would like to bid on, you have a question on it, you can send us those questions. We will answer them and we will post the responses to those questions on the website and send it to you. But that's in the interest of fair and open competition, so everybody will see those answers.